Book 3, Chapter 15 of Resurrection. Although Novodvorov was highly esteemed of all the revolutionists, though he was very learned and considered very wise, Nekhludoff reckoned him among those of the revolutionists who, being below the average moral level, were very far below it. His inner life was of a nature directly opposite to that of Simonson's. Simonson was one of those people, of an essentially masculine type, whose actions follow the dictates of their reason and are determined by it. Novodvorov belonged, on the contrary, to the class of people of a feminine type, whose reason is directed partly towards the attainment of aims set by their feelings, partly to the justification of acts suggested by their feelings. The whole of Novodvorov's revolutionary activity, though he could explain it very eloquently and very convincingly, appeared to Nekhludoff to be founded on nothing but ambition and the desire for supremacy. At first, his capacity for assimilating the thoughts of others, and of expressing them correctly, had given him a position of supremacy among pupils and teachers in the gymnasium and the university, where qualities such as his are highly prized, and he was satisfied. When he had finished his studies and received his diploma, he suddenly altered his views, and from a modern liberal he turned into a rabid narodovolets, in order, so Kryltsov, who did not like him, said, to gain supremacy in another sphere. As he was devoid of those moral and aesthetic qualities which call forth doubts and hesitation, he very soon acquired a position in the revolutionary world which satisfied him, that of the leader of a party. Having once chosen a direction, he never doubted or hesitated, and was therefore certain that he never made a mistake. Everything seemed quite simple, clear, and certain, and the narrowness and one-sidedness of his views did make everything seem simple and clear. One only had to be logical, as he said. His self-assurance was so great that it either repelled people or made them submit to him. As he carried on his work among very young people, his boundless self-assurance led them to believe him very profound and wise. The majority did submit to him, and he had a great success in revolutionary circles. His activity was directed to the preparation of a rising, in which he was to usurp the power and call together a council. A programme, composed by him, should be proposed before the council, and he felt sure that this programme of his solved every problem, and that it would be impossible not to carry it out. His comrades respected but did not love him. He did not love any one, looked upon all men of note as upon rivals, and would have willingly treated them as old male monkeys treat young ones, if he could have done it. He would have torn all mental power, every capacity, from other men, so that they should not interfere with the display of his talents. He behaved well only to those who bowed before him. Now, on the journey, he behaved well to Kondratiev, who was influenced by his propaganda, to Vera Dukova, and pretty little Gabretz, who were both in love with him. Although in principle he was in favour of the women's movement, yet in the depth of his soul he considered all women stupid and insignificant, except those whom he was sentimentally in love with, as he was now in love with Gabretz, and such women he considered to be exceptions, whose merits he alone was capable of discerning. The question of the relations of the sexes he also looked upon as thoroughly solved by accepting free union. He had one nominal and one real wife, from both of whom he was separated, having come to the conclusion that there was no real love between them, and now he thought of entering on a free union with Gabretz. He despised Nekhludoff for playing the fool, as Novodvorov termed it, with Maslova, but especially for the freedom Nekhludoff took of considering the defects of the existing system and the methods of correcting those defects, in a manner which was not only not exactly the same as Novodvorov's, but was Nekhludoff's own, a prince's, that is, a fool's manner. Nekhludoff felt this relation to Novodvorov's towards him, and knew to his sorrow that in spite of the state of goodwill in which he found himself on this journey, he could not help paying this man in his own coin, and could not stifle the strong antipathy he felt for him. End of Book 3, Chapter 15. Book 3, Chapter 16 of Resurrection. The voices of officials sounded from the next room. All the prisoners were silent, and a sergeant, followed by 2 convoy soldiers, entered. The time of the inspection had come. The sergeant counted every one, and when Nekhludoff's turn came, he addressed him with kindly familiarity. "You must not stay any longer, Prince, after the inspection. You must go now." Nekhludoff knew what this meant, went up to the sergeant and shoved a 3-rouble note into his hand. "Ah, well, what is one to do with you? Stay a bit longer if you like." The sergeant was about to go when another sergeant, followed by a convict, a spare man with a thin beard and a bruise under his eye, came in. "It's about the girl I have come," said the convict. "Here's Daddy come," came the ringing accents of a child's voice, and a flaxen head appeared from behind Rintseva, who, with Katusha's and Mary Pavlovna's help, was making a new garment for the child out of one of Rintseva's own petticoats. "Yes, daughter, it's me," Busovkin, the prisoner, said softly. "She is quite comfortable here," said Mary Pavlovna, looking with pity at Busovkin's bruised face. "Leave her with us." "The ladies are making me new clothes," said the girl, pointing to Rintseva's sewing. "Nice red ones," she went on prattling. "Do you wish to sleep with us?" asked Rintseva, caressing the child. "Yes, I wish, and Daddy too." "No, Daddy can't." "Well, leave her then," she said, turning to the father. "Yes, you may leave her," said the first sergeant, and went out with the other. As soon as they were out of the room, Nabatoff went up to Busovkin, slapped him on the shoulder, and said, "I say, old fellow, is it true that Karmanoff wishes to exchange?" Busovkin's kindly, gentle face turned suddenly sad, and a veil seemed to dim his eyes. "We have heard nothing, hardly," he said, and with the same dimness still over his eyes he turned to the child. "Well, Aksutka, it seems you're to make yourself comfortable with the ladies," and he hurried away. "It's true about the exchange, and he knows it very well," said Nabatoff. "What are you going to do?" "I shall tell the authorities in the next town. I know both prisoners by sight," said Nekhludoff. All were silent, fearing a recommencement of the dispute. Simonson, who had been lying with his arms thrown back behind his head and not speaking, rose, and determinedly walked up to Nekhludoff, carefully passing round those who were sitting. "Could you listen to me now?" "Of course," and Nekhludoff rose and followed him. Katusha looked up with an expression of surprise, and meeting Nekhludoff's eyes, she blushed and shook her head. "What I want to speak to you about is this," Simonson began, when they had come out into the passage. In the passage, the din of the criminals' voices and shouts sounded louder. Nekhludoff made a face, but Simonson did not seem to take any notice. "Knowing of your relations to Katerina Maslova," he began, seriously and frankly, with his kind eyes looking straight into Nekhludoff's face, "I consider it my duty." He was obliged to stop, because 2 voices were heard disputing and shouting, both at once close to the door. "I tell you, blockhead, they are not mine," one voice shouted. "May you choke, you devil," snorted the other. At this moment Mary Pavlovna came out into the passage. "How can one talk here?" she said. "Go in. Vera is alone there." And she went in at the second door and entered a tiny room, evidently meant for a solitary cell, which was now placed at the disposal of the political women prisoners. Vera Dukova lay covered up, head and all, on the bed. "She has got a headache and is asleep, so she cannot hear you, and I will go away," said Mary Pavlovna. "On the contrary, stay here," said Simonson. "I have no secrets from anyone, certainly none from you." "All right," said Mary Pavlovna, and moving her whole body from side to side like a child, so as to get further back onto the bed, she settled down to listen, her beautiful hazel eyes seeming to look somewhere far away. "Well then, this is my business," Simonson repeated. "Knowing of your relations to Katerina Maslova, I consider myself bound to explain to you my relations to her." Nekhludoff could not help admiring the simplicity and truthfulness with which Simonson spoke to him. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I should like to marry Katerina Maslova." "How strange," said Mary Pavlovna, fixing her eyes on Simonson. "And so I made up my mind to ask her to be my wife," Simonson continued. "What can I do? It depends on her," said Nekhludoff. "Yes, but she will not come to any decision without you." "Why?" "Because as long as your relations with her are unsettled, she cannot make up her mind." "As far as I am concerned, it is finally settled. I should like to do what I consider to be my duty, and also to lighten her fate, but on no account would I wish to put any restraint on her." "Yes, but she does not wish to accept your sacrifice." "It is no sacrifice." "And I know that this decision of hers is final." "Well then, there is no need to speak to me," said Nekhludoff. "She wants you to acknowledge that you think as she does." "How can I acknowledge that I must not do what I consider to be my duty? All I can say is that I am not free, but she is." Simonson was silent. Then, after thinking a little, he said, "Very well then, I'll tell her. You must not think I am in love with her," he continued. "I love her as a splendid, unique human being who has suffered much. I want nothing from her. I have only an awful longing to help her, to lighten her Nekhludoff was surprised to hear the trembling in Simonson's voice. "To lighten her position," Simonson continued. "If she does not wish to accept your help, let her accept mine. If she consents, I shall ask to be sent to the place where she will be imprisoned. 4 years are not an eternity. I would live near her, and perhaps might lighten her fate." And he again stopped, too agitated to continue. "What am I to say?" said Nekhludoff. "I am very glad she has found such a protector as you." "That's what I wanted to know," Simonson interrupted. "I wanted to know if, loving her and wishing her happiness, you would consider it good for her to marry me." "Oh yes," said Nekhludoff decidedly. "It all depends on her. I only wish that this suffering soul should find rest," said Simonson, with such childlike tenderness as no one could have expected from so morose-looking a man. Simonson rose, and stretching his lips out to Nekhludoff, smiled shyly and kissed him. "So I shall tell her," and he went away. End of Book 3, Chapter 16.